All right. Thank you everyone for joining us this afternoon for Home 101 before a home renovation. Visualize it first. Today we are lucky enough to have Lori Stainhoke with us. Lori is the award-winning founder of Capital Pixel, an architectural visualization firm that specializes in imagery for real estate using 3D renderings, animation, and virtual reality. Capital Pixel creates lifelike imagery that tells a story. Thank you, Lori, for joining us. And I know you have a really great slide deck for us to take a look at, and I'll turn it over to you now.
Awesome. Thanks so much for the introduction. Hi, everyone. I definitely always have to kick off Zooms with like a wave, even though I know that's awkward sometimes. But thanks for spending your lunch hour with me. I'm going to walk you through a whole bunch of imagery and start first by giving a little introduction of myself and my background. We'll do some before and after images, which are always favorites. And then I'm going to show you some ways to use 3D renderings as part of a home upgrade. We'll talk a little bit about why 3D visualization can save you time and money in your projects, and just discuss how 3D renderings can sort of give you peace of mind with design decisions. And I think I see some familiar faces in here, which is awesome. So thank you for coming. Maybe also if you can just drop in the chat. I'm trying to go to the next slide. Let me see. Drop in the chat. Have you done a home renovation in the past year because of pandemic reasons? If maybe you realized something in your house or your home office needed an upgrade to make your working situation work. Or I would love to know if you are planning a renovation in the near future, and sort of when we open this up at the end, we can talk about reasons, why people are here and what would be most helpful to talk about. So as Angela said in the introduction, my name is Lori Stainhoke. I graduated from University of Maryland with an architecture degree in 2005. I went on to get a master's in visual effects and animation, so slight departure from the architecture, but you'll see how it ties into my work. I'm currently living in Tacoma Park, Maryland. I just moved here about 6 months ago after, gosh, I think it was like 15 years in DC. So I'm excited to be back in Maryland, and I'm spending my time now running two small companies. One, I'm the creative director of Capital Pixel. As Angela said, I specialize in creating pretty pictures for real estate. That's sort of the easiest way to describe it. Very similar to what you might see in a Pixar movie, except instead of characters and Hollywood, we're talking more about architecture and spaces and places. My other work is a jewelry designer for Love Lori Michelle. It started sort of as a creative hobby, but I'm going to talk a little bit more about that towards the end and sort of show you how the process there ties into doing things in 3D for architecture. So these slides are just a couple examples of 3D renderings. These are created fully digitally, so fully using a computer. And I'm going to go to the next slide. This kind of shows what those images might look like in what I call wireframe mode. So every piece that you see in those renderings is created first with a 3D digital model. So all the couches, all the windows and walls and ceilings are all done in the computer to create those images. This is a really classic example of the work I do. This was done for a real estate developer to help a potential condo buyer understand sort of what their living room space and kitchen would look like. And people always love to see kitchens because you want to know sort of what the layout is, but also what are the finishes on your cabinets, or what does the backsplash tile look like, things like that. With this bedroom image, I was trying to convey sort of high ceilings, lots of natural light, With any 3D rendering, people are always really drawn towards something that will help them understand a sense of home or, a sense of place. What is it going to feel like if I live here or design my space a certain way? Bathrooms, everyone loves bathroom renderings. Similar to kitchens, people always want to know, what are the finishes going to look like when they all come together? Does the tile I picked for the wall sort of fit and look good with the fixtures and the floor tile? And what does my vanity look like? Things like that. So 3D renderings can help sort of tie together all the design components of a space. I also do animations as well. I'm gonna see if I hit play here. This is an animation that I did for the Hillel Center that's actually or coming soon to the University of Maryland. I thought some of you might be familiar with that name and space, so I wanted to show this. But this animation was done as part of a larger video to entice donors to give money and help make this project a reality. So this animation really shows what this potential space could look like before it's built. And it's a really, really incredibly powerful tool to help someone understand what a space looks like before it is built, and can be a really powerful fundraising tool as well. So for these next slides, like I mentioned, I'm going to walk through some before and after pictures. This was done for a client in DC that purchased this home with a kitchen that looked like this, and it just needed a lot of love. And this was the rendering that I created for them. This was probably actually almost 10 years ago, so this image is starting to look a little bit old even to me now. But I'll just click back and forth between the two. You can see that my goal was to help them understand that what their space could look like after they gave it some love. And a lot of times I work with homeowners who have, historic homes or spaces that they can't quite figure out, how is this going to look? Is it worth totally gutting? Should we keep some of the finishes and fixtures, or does it need to be totally renovated? So the power of seeing the before and after is a great tool for understanding what your space could look like with a little bit of renovation. This image is from the same project. Again, we're just looking at the living room of this historic home. With this image, we were trying to decide on a lot of finishes for their new space. They were wondering whether they wanted to keep the existing wood trim around the windows, whether they wanted to refinish those existing floors or put in new ones. You can see on the right side of the image, there's kind of a fireplace existing there that juts out into the space. And one of their considerations was they were just unsure of how that piece sort of worked in their living room, and was it taking up too much space. So by creating these images, I helped them understand that it could become a focal point of the room, and maybe they wanted to expose the existing brickwork there and keep that as part of the design of the space. And sort of talking about it in words is a lot different than being able to see it visually and see what makes sense. So that was sort of a benefit of creating that type of image. Again, another set of before and after. This was a home that was, of course, under renovation. And the owner wanted to be able to set up tours and market to potential buyers. So I helped create this image that would just show the curb appeal of the house when it was all finished, with newly painted shingles, a bright sort of pop of color, on the front door. We added, of course, nice lush green landscaping and a blue sky. And it really just gives people the power to see what's there. If you just see this image, a lot of people would be completely turned off and not be able to visualize what that future home could potentially be. This project, I'm going to click through kind of quickly. This was a Capitol Hill DC kitchen. Actually, I should have put the before image in this one as well, but the space there in the center where you see the island with the 3 stools, That used to be just a small sort of archway opening in the middle there. And this client wanted to look at what would happen if they opened up the entire space there where the island sits now and make it a sort of open concept between the kitchen and dining room. So you can see the difference in these images. They're not quite as finished as some of the first ones that I showed you, but these were more conceptual to help the client understand the space and what the sort of flow in the kitchen and dining room would feel like if they opened up that wall. And then we were also able to use these images to help them make design decisions like, did they want to keep that exposed brick on the back wall? What sort of color and shape island did they want to do? We use this to discuss whether the microwave went under counter where we show it there in the drawings, or does it go somewhere else? So even though they're not completely photorealistic finished images, they're really informative to help people understand what their space could potentially look like. And then eventually they were able to take these drawings, which we did before we touched a single thing inside their house. They took these drawings to a contractor to bid the project out. So they started this project on a much better foot, being able to give conceptual images to a contractor and get bids quicker, get things more efficiently than if you're just, cold calling a builder and saying, I want to renovate my kitchen. It's a lot easier to understand when you have images to sort of go with your ideas. So I showed you a lot of images. How can you get 3D renderings done? I'm going to walk you through a lot of different options in the upcoming slides. There are a lot of DIY options if you want to do it yourself. And then, of course, depending on sort of the size and scope of your project, it might be something that you want to outsource to a professional. Hold on. Okay. So the easiest option is to take your iPhone and take some photos of your project and just use the little sketch tool with your finger and sketch on it. These are actually images of my own home of a project that we're hoping to start on sometime this summer, where we can add a screen porch and a fireplace to the existing home. So while this is not a traditional 3D rendering like what I showed you in some of the earlier slides, it's definitely a very easy form of communicating in more of a 3D space than just drawing something on paper or just communicating your design intent through words. So even these really rough and ugly sketches, we were able to take these to an architect that we're working with and use these as a starting point for our design and say, here's what we have in mind. And we got a lot further faster starting with this sort of, even this sort of really ugly visual. And it helps, number one, just understand the starting scope of the project. They can get a feel for the existing conditions. What does the current site look like? So everybody sort of has these really basic tools available to them, even if you're not an artist or you're not good at drawing. I guarantee you can make something that looks like this as a starting point. The other DIY option is using online tools. There are a lot of free things out there that didn't even exist 5 or 10 years ago. This is just a screen grab of IKEA's homepage. You can go on there right now and play around with this program. You can choose your room size and shape. You can put in all the measurements and the layout. You can see on the left there, they have options for adding doors, adding windows. You can choose your own flooring. And then of course you can go in and choose from their library of lights and fixtures and furniture and sort of plop in all of their pieces into your room and get a pretty good visualization of what your design intent is. And this is a great tool to play around with if your partner or your spouse, like you guys have different ideas about what your design is or where you're going with something. Even just sitting down with somebody and playing with this tool is really powerful way to start thinking about things in 3 dimensions. Home Depot has a similar sort of interface on their website. You can go and search for and play with that. Of course, it links to all of their products and things that you can buy. And then Sherwin-Williams and all the major paint suppliers have a similar feature as well. You can take a photo of your room and upload it and then click through and play with different paint colors and all sorts of things like that. So these are all different forms of 3D visualization that you can work with. Other DIY options, there's tons of apps out there, House, Magic Plan, Home Design 3D, iScape. I personally haven't used any of these, but I've heard these names come up time and again, just in talking with people in the field. I think most of these are free or pretty low cost to buy, and they're fun to play around with. So those are just other options that are out there. One last sort of do-it-yourself option is Google Sketchup. I don't know if any of you have heard of it before, but it's a free product to download. You can go on Google's website and do that pretty easily. They do also have a paid version that has a little more functionality, but you can create things like this image with SketchUp with a little bit of practice. I'll caveat and say that it's not a program that you can sit down and learn in 1 or 2 days. But if you've got the time and the patience and like to learn new things, I would definitely say give it a go and check it out. You can very easily add walls and doors and landscaping. They have a really vast online library of furniture you can download. Anything you want, you can find it online and sort of add it to your drawing. So that's a great utility as well. If you decide to outsource drawings, this is probably the route that most people will go if you're talking about a much larger scale or larger scope project. If you engage with an architect or an interior designer, this is just a typical image of some 2D floor plans that you might receive from working with an architect. If you are doing anything that needs a permit or approval, you're definitely going to want to work with an architect to get scale drawings like this that you can then give to a builder. One of the really important things to ask before you sort of engage with or decide to work with a certain designer or architect is to ask them how they work and what sort of drawings they'll be providing you with. So on the left here, you can see these are, again, just 2D elevations of the exterior of a home. And on the right side is the 3D model of the same home. So almost all architects today are working in 3D. People have just kind of come to demand it. And especially if you're, like I said before, getting permits or needing approval for a project, being able to visualize it in 3D beforehand is really important. But just ask that question before you engage the services of someone. Ask them, you know, am I going to just be getting 2D drawings like the ones shown here? Do you work in 3D? You know, what are the different costs associated with each? And just make sure you are getting what you think you need or what you're paying for. To be honest, not every project needs a really detailed 3D model for it. I think that just depends on the size of your project, the scope of what you're trying to accomplish, and sort of how much information you would like to have before embarking on a renovation. So all of these techniques can help give you peace of mind with your design decisions. Creating 3D images, even if it's just the really basic sketches that I showed up front, they can help save you time and money. They will help make it easier for you to choose things like materials and colors. I can't tell you how many times I've worked on projects where creating a 3D image has expose the conflicts in the structure of the project or conflicts in the design. For example, you know, you might be making some 3D sort of layouts of a kitchen and discover that where you thought you were going to put the outlets, there's plumbing running behind the wall there, and you can't put something where you thought you could. So a lot of times, if you're just working in two dimensions or just looking at floor plans, which, we're not all architects, we might not be familiar with that. Some of these things just get lost until you're actually in the field, building or constructing the projects. And then finally, 3D imagery like this allows you to make a lot of decisions ahead of time versus making those decisions in the field. So if you can choose some of the things up front, your project should go smoother and faster and just be done in a more timely manner. Just a couple more images I threw in here. This was a home office where I worked with a client. They were trying to decide whether to paint the existing wood trim in their space or leave it as is. And of course, he was really, really hesitant about painting over all of this beautiful trim and what it was going to look like. So we did these images up front before he bought paint or did anything. And whoops, skipped ahead. He ultimately decided not to touch it because we looked at these images and, there were 10 more iterations of this that we did with wallpaper and all sorts of things. But being able to see something up front, it saved him the time of having to buy supplies, of having to, go ahead and make those physical steps. We were able to see it beforehand before doing anything in the physical space. These next few slides are some images of a lobby in New Jersey where I helped this building owner come up with some ideas for a facelift for this lobby that just really needed a renovation. I think they hadn't done anything to it in about 30 years. So they sent me this photo and they wanted to actually work with the residents of this building to figure out what they wanted their new lobby to look like. So I came up with these two schemes for them. One's kind of the lighter paint color and then this darker scheme. They actually printed them out on oversized poster boards and put them in the lobby of the building and had residents come by and leave little Post-it notes to vote on what they liked. And the dark scheme with the darker paint won hands down. And it's just a really interesting experiment in the power of the visual tool. They could have come to their residents and said, we want to renovate the lobby. One scheme has this and one scheme has that, but using words and seeing these images is just a totally different way to approach a design problem, especially one in which, I'm guessing that the people that live there are not versed in interior design or making changes to lobby spaces. So just being able to react immediately to these images was a huge sort of bonus. I think I have two more projects to click through here. If anybody lives in an area where you have an HOA, anytime you want to upgrade or design or improve your space, a lot of times you have to get approval. So for this particular project, I had a client come to me and she lived in this apartment building, condo building, I guess, that had an HOA, and she wanted to screen in her porch space so that she could just sit out there and have a beer and not get eaten by the mosquitoes. So she had to go before her HOA and showed them these two options for what she was envisioning for the screen for her space. So this first option, she showed them the screen is set back a little bit, about 8 inches. And the other option was to make it sort of flush with the outside of the building. And they were able to vote and told her to go ahead and, they actually think they approved both versions and said that's fine to do. But again, a lot of times images like these are used for permitting or approval purposes. And they're really powerful. Again, instead of going to a group and saying, I want to put in a screen, they're going to come back and say, well, what color is it? And how does it interface with our building? Are you hanging it on the outside or are you mounting it to the brick? How many panels does it have? Is there a door? She was able to really easily answer all of those questions with these images and get approval. I'm going to go out on a limb and say it saved her time and having to go back to their monthly meeting again and sort of re-present a case. She was able to just get sign off right away and sort of move forward with doing this. In the examples I shared earlier, like for example, I live in a historic district, so there's a different approval process for making changes to my home as to, if I was outside a historic district. So having 3D visuals like this is again a really powerful tool if you have certain circumstances that you would need visuals to sort of explain your story and explain what you're doing. Okay, one last set of slides for this project. This client wanted to open up their kitchen to sort of flow into another space, kind of similar to the other one I showed you in DC. So I did this really quick and dirty set of images. Again, these are not final by any means, but they sort of helped them understand what the new space would look like. They used these drawings to help figure out whether they had the space to add that island peninsula there in the image. And then we also used the images just to like test really different design ideas. Like they were contemplating putting this little sort of pop of color under the island area. And they were debating, do we want to do that? Do we want to tile it? Do we want to keep it white? So I did a whole series of images for them that were really rough, but they helped them hone in on just overall design decisions and sort of how they would go forward with this space. Okay, so I mentioned this at the beginning. I also make 3D printed jewelry, and I've come to realize, in the time that I've spent doing both of these sort of jobs, that they're really tied together and linked in a lot of ways that I didn't necessarily realize when I started down this path. But in making jewelry, I start by making a 3D model of the piece, very similar to that wireframe image I showed you in the beginning. And the process follows along really similarly to what I'm doing when I'm creating images for architecture. So, starting with inspiration and sketches, creating a 3D model to preview the design, and then finally producing the piece in metal, so fabricating it. I had a customer recently who she works for the DC Board of Elections, and she said, "Oh, I really want to make a ring for myself that says vote, just to sort of symbolize her life's work." And this is the sort of preview of the 3D model that I made for her. And I sent her this little animation that you're seeing there. And it's just a preview of the model that I made. I said, this is immediately what came to mind for me. I said, is this what you were thinking, or did you have something else in mind? And she wrote back and she was like, no, that's exactly it. I love it. She described it as like Captain Planet with like the vote like coming out. And anyway, she immediately reacted. And so I'm currently making the ring for her in sterling silver. And it's so similar to the process of designing spaces where we're looking at this in 3D. I sort of got her write off and got her approval, and then we make the actual item. So the opportunity would have been there for her to say, oh, that's not quite right. Let's make the letters a little bit smaller, or let's make them wrap around the band. So the ability to make those changes before I'm working in precious metals is just a really great opportunity to sort of get approval, get everybody on the same page, and then make the product. So just wanted to sort of share how powerful it is to be able to see something before you actually do that thing. Takeaways from today. I hope you guys enjoyed seeing some of these images. I was telling Angela, it was a treat for me to be able to look back and reflect on my work. I don't often get a chance to sort of go through the archives and think about some of the things I've worked on, but I think a picture really is worth 1,000 words, right? Like we have the power to see things before we do them. And I think that communicating with images is really beneficial to any design project whether you're making something as small as a ring or a piece of jewelry, all the way up to, a large scale home renovation. Don't be afraid to create your own images as a starting point. I think that we all have a lot of tools available on our phones and online that, almost anyone can generate really basic 3D imagery if you want to. Another takeaway, be sure if you work with a designer or architect, ask questions of them before you kick things off. Find out whether they work in 3D. Do you need them to work in 3D? Maybe yes or maybe no. But just make sure you're on the right page about what sort of design drawings you would get in working with an interior designer or an architect. And I think really just my main message is that, 3D visualization is very easy to respond to and easier for people to understand. I think more so than what you would get from traditional, 2D plans or just trying to verbally communicate a project. So that's it from me. Thank you, like I said, for coming and spending your lunch hour with me. I know there's a lot of Zoom fatigue going on out there, so I always appreciate getting to talk about my work. I would love it if you guys get in touch with me. I put my email and both of my websites there. I'm also really active on Instagram, social media, so if you want to connect with me that way, you can find me at Capital Pixel and Love Lori Michelle. I, trying not to make this a advertisement for my own work and my stuff, but reach out to me if you have a project that you're working on and want some starting steps. I work with a lot of local designers, interior designers, architects, builders that are extremely talented. And if I can't help you out with something, I can certainly point you in the right direction for your project or connect you with somebody who, could help you. So don't be afraid to shoot me an email, especially if you have specific questions about, your own projects or how to get something done. And yeah, I would love to just open it up if anybody has questions or I know I talk really fast when I get nervous. So I'm gonna stop my screen share here and just, yeah, feel free to type in the chat or if people want to